Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Another Friday on the GSMC Soccer Podcast. Big welcome in. For those of you that haven't been here before, I'm your host, Lukas Moore. And we've got a fun day of conversation. Won't be as fun as perhaps Monday. As most of you know, today, transfer deadline day around the world of soccer. Unfortunately, the realities of podcasting have made me want to change the topic for today to where we are not going to be discussing any potential transfer news or rumors. I think I got one topic in regarding the transfer deadline, but that's because things will be changing all throughout this day, and you don't want to speculate on something and then 3 hours later it be true or false, where we might be in the middle of producing this podcast and the news is completely different. So, transfer deadline day, we'll go over all the big happenings on Monday from transfer deadline day. One thing, though, I did want to touch on is Antonee Robinson, the defender from the United States men's national team. We do have the finale of his transfer deadline day. Really interesting stuff happening there, and we'll circle back around to a continuing example of United States players being able to compete at the highest levels of international soccer. We'll preview Leicester City versus Chelsea this weekend. Manchester United, they've got a big match as well, because every match is this big when your entire fan base is ready to burn Old Trafford to the ground. And Real Madrid and Barcelona, absolutely huge weekend in La Liga. Real Madrid facing Atletico Madrid tomorrow morning, and Barcelona with an interesting match. Right now for them, every match is interesting. It doesn't matter if they're playing Atletico or Sevilla or Real Madrid, because they are apparently capable of being beaten by anybody with the way they're performing as a unit, the way Kiki Setien has managed in his first couple of games, coming off a loss to Valencia, a last-minute win against a third-tier Spanish side in the Copa del Rey. So interesting times for Barcelona. We'll preview and predict that match a little bit later in the show. But transfer deadline day, it's one of those just exciting, fun, beautiful days of following club soccer. It's like nothing else in sports, to where you have 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 leagues participating in transfers, in rumors. You have all different combinations, permutations about what can happen, how it affects each league's standing, how it affects the future of these leagues. It's really one of the more exciting and thrilling ways to do a trade deadline in sports. And if you've ever played the FIFA video game, the clicking clock, like 24 style, it gets to you. It makes it exciting. And that's exactly what all these clubs are going through today. Just, do we make a move? Do we have an opportunity to make a move? Should we make a move? Should we spend this money? Are we good enough to compete in the Champions League? Are we good enough to make a run at the final 4 spots in the table? And all the important leagues throughout the world are in the midst of their runs to determine whether they get into European competition, to determine whether they're going to be league champions outside of the Premier League. So it's a really crucial day for everybody. This year, early rumors, doesn't look like anything major is going to happen, but that's why I don't want to talk about it and say that it's not going to happen, because literally as we speak, a major transfer deal of a star could be getting done, and we could have some serious change in world soccer. But it is an extremely fun day, and it's unlike anything else in sports. Truly. I mean, the NBA trade deadline can be interesting. Major League Baseball trade deadline can be interesting. But it's usually 2 or 3 to 4 teams that need to make a move, are going to affect the league standings if they make a move. But in club soccer, the permutations are unbelievable, and there's so many star players and so many guys who could fit in better places. Really an interesting time. Interesting time for one of our own, a United States men's national team back, Antonee Robinson, younger guy, reported to have agreed on terms to join AC Milan and Zlatan Ibrahimovic in a side that's really come into form recently in Serie A. Over a $10 million transfer paid out to Wigan Athletic. That was all rumors, and it came to an end. And he will not be heading to AC Milan. He will be staying at Wigan Athletic. What happened? Find out on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back in, GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Moore. And it's a beautiful day. Actually, I haven't been outside yet, so I can't say it's a beautiful day in Chicago. I'm guessing it's cold. Usually just have to look at the calendar, not a weather report, to figure out whether it's cold or not in the Midwest. MLS is getting closer and closer. That's going to be really exciting. That'll really help here in the United States. That pre-opening day baseball sport zone after the Super Bowl ends. Your college football's over. Pro football's over. The NBA heads towards an all-star break, and honestly, it's at the point of the season where it's hard to really lock into it. And there's just this big gap, and the MLS, the start of it, fills it very nicely for people that enjoy the MLS in the United States. And it'll be certainly exciting. We'll dive all into an MLS preview and all that fun stuff a little later on this podcast. Not in this show, but a couple weeks from now, once we get a little bit closer. Beginning of March is when the Major League Soccer season kicks off. Sticking in the United States, I mentioned Antonee Robinson, the United States defender, athletic, good young talent, a part of a really strong group of young players that plays for the United States that I've mentioned on this show are going to continue to be more common. And AC Milan was looking to make a deal to bring him in as only, I think, the 10th full-time American in Serie A. It's just something the Italians never really like to do. And they paid over $10 million for him to acquire Robinson from Wigan Athletic. And he had 72 hours to get together, report for the physical, clear medical, to be sent to AC Milan, and that fell through. So a not finished medical by Antonee Robinson will keep him at Wigan Athletic. I don't know if this is a purposeful move or what the motives behind this are from Robinson. If there are motives at all, perhaps it's a paperwork error. Perhaps it's a myriad of things. The story just broke a couple minutes before we started the show, so it's tough to really say off the top. It's interesting, though, and it's certainly a shame because you'd like to see a player that's participating in the United States men's national team to make that move, to be in a high-class league, to be with a high-class organization, and play with and learn from high-class players that are at AC Milan. Now, I know they're a mid-tier team so far this year in Serie A, but they're always within the top five, and I'm sure they'll get there by the end of the season, especially the way they've been playing since the acquisition of Zlatan Ibrahimovic. But interesting stuff that Antonee Robinson will be unable to join AC Milan in this transfer window. We'll see how that plays out for him in the summer. However, it is another example of what I continue to tell you is happening. It's happening right now, of the young American soccer bulge, to where so many young American players are starting to be transferred, are starting to be bought, are starting to be believed in. So many young American soccer players are starting to figure this thing out. And I think that the time is here. We've been waiting for so long at least those that are above 30 years old, have been waiting for so long, those that are soccer fans, for soccer to catch on in the United States enough to where just the general athleticism of the country, the general belief and love of sports in the country creates soccer players without any sort of advanced developmental system. And that's exactly what's starting to happen. Because you can turn on the TV at any time around the country. Kids can turn on the TV anytime and watch about any soccer match from any league in the world. I've got a buddy who's a Queens Park Rangers fan. They're in the championship, and yet he can still find a way to watch their matches. Can connect with the team on Twitter, right? Can see highlights of all the goals scored. The modern age has inspired a generation of youth in America to be more interested in soccer. Has it taken over basketball? No. Has it taken over football? No. But it's gotten popular enough that a kid that falls in love with the game will have more access to it. Or more access to it allows them to fall in love with the game. I mentioned scenes like we see in Portland and Seattle. Imagine if you're a 7-year-old in that crowd, how you'd be inspired to go play soccer when you're among 55,000 fans cheering at the top of their lungs and there's a high-quality product on the field. All these things will create soccer players, create great athletes in the United States that are worth $10 million, that are worth, like Christian Pulisic, almost half of $100 million. They're going to be players that are worth it in the United States, even if the United States men's national team and the United States program continues to step on its own toes, continues to harm its own development. Even with all of that, the United States is going to have talent, going to have a lot of it playing all across the world. And we've seen it time and time again. And that's why the best 5 or 6 players on the roster right now, the best 5 or 6 players are young. And that will be the trend moving forward. Now, with the goal being 2026, you need the young players that are there now to reach their peak and be effective players internationally at their 28, 29-year-old season, and hope that these youth players continue to develop, continue to play in bigger leagues, and then they'll be that depth. They'll be the young excitement that's on a potential 2026 team and obviously the 2022 team. It's, I think, exciting stuff to see players like Robinson involved in transfer rumors, being bought for $10+ million. I think it's all positive stuff for the United States men's national team, for soccer here in the United States. And I think it's another example of the game's growth here in the United States. Although it has been bad headlines recently, I think from a broader point of view, if you take a step back, the United States is in a better position now in terms of talent, raw talent, than they've ever been in world soccer. We'll step aside. On the other side of the break, there's a lot of big matches to preview this weekend. Leicester City versus Chelsea, the biggest Premier League match of the weekend. Plus, we'll talk about Manchester United, and could Ole Gunnar Solskjaer be out the door with a loss? All that and more. On the other side of the break, you're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Big welcome into the show. We've got Leicester City versus Chelsea on the docket this weekend. Fun match. Two teams near the top of the Premier League. And although it might be overshadowed by transfer deadline day, it is one of those fun, important matches that the Premier League continuously tosses up time and time again. And that's why we love the Premier League so much, because there are quality teams from places 4 to about 8 that create some really interesting matchups on a day when there's not necessarily top of the league teams competing. Leicester City right now in 3rd, Chelsea in 4th. Then you have Man United and Tottenham. Those teams have been jumbling. But Leicester City at 48 points. It should be a really interesting matchup against Chelsea. It's why we wanted to preview it. For those of you on the East Coast, you'll have to wake up pretty early. That's a 7:30 a.m. kickoff on the East Coast. For those of you on the West Coast, you're probably going to have to stay up to watch it, at least most people's sleep schedules. I don't know what yours is. But Leicester City, Chelsea, this is the form these teams are in right now. Leicester coming off a tough 2-1 loss in the Carabao Cup, and then a win in the FA Cup. Their last 3 Premier League matches, 1 win, 2 losses to Burnley and Southampton. So it's been a rough stretch recently for Leicester City. For Chelsea, win against Hull City, that's in the FA Cup. They drew against Arsenal, lost against Newcastle United back on January 18th, but a win against Burnley on January 11th is kind of rounding out Chelsea's form. I think Chelsea's the better side here in terms of raw talent, although Leicester City is ahead in the table and has had a better season. But Chelsea's Chelsea, and I know they're coming off that transfer ban, but I really like the youth in their squad. I like Chelsea in this one over Leicester City. When you look at Leicester City's form, and just they haven't had enough time as an elite Premier League team to build the type of youth and organizational depth that a Chelsea will naturally have even after a transfer ban. So Chelsea's real problem here is finding consistency, right? Finding a way to bounce back after, being disgraced on the international stage for kind of fudging the numbers in terms of transfers. And they have a little more of a, I think, backbone, and that's why you're seeing them still at the top of the table even after that whole mess, even after not being able to go out and sign elite-level players. They're still finding a way at the top of the table. They have a little more of an organizational backbone and organizational depth. Plus, they're in better form. But it should be a really fun match. It's a toss-up match, really. Leicester City could certainly find a way to straighten their form out, figure this thing out. And for them, they just want to find a way back into the Champions League. And if they can hang around the top 3, they're going to gain more money, gain more recognition, gain more popularity. And if they can establish that consistency, Leicester City, in the Premier League, they'll be able to really start to round out that organizational depth, round out really young, good players, and be consistently within the top 5 of the Premier League, and maybe even start winning them like they did in that miracle season a few years ago. But this weekend, I like Chelsea. I like it to tighten up in terms of the teams following Liverpool and Manchester City at the top of the Premier League table. I don't think Leicester City is going to be in position to catch Man City. And I would just like to see the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 even with Wolverhampton at 34. I'd love to see that really a tight race to get into one of those Champions League spots down the end of the season. Because that's really our only hope for the Premier League being exciting down the stretch. If Leicester City comes out and wins, maybe that 4th spot becomes interesting, but you'd love Leicester City to fall back to the pack with a Chelsea win this weekend if you're into exciting finishes. Obviously, if you're a Leicester fan, probably don't want that to happen. But I got Chelsea this weekend. On the other side of the break, we'll talk about Manchester United and what that match could mean for the future of their manager role, although they've been staunch in defending him. If a loss this weekend happens, that story could change. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Big welcome in GSMC Soccer Podcast. Give us a follow at GSMC_soccer. Like us on Facebook, GSMC Soccer. Check out all the great podcasts on the GSMC Podcast Network. Fun Friday. Might not be a fun weekend, though, for Manchester United if they don't find a way to grab a win in the Premier League. Listen, we've talked about Manchester United a lot on this show. They're a big brand that's fallen off. They're a big brand that I've told you to lower expectations for. They are no longer the type of team that they once were. They are no longer this powerhouse, this heavy hitter, this Champions League contender. They could be in a single season. They could be now and again. But it will take a long-term, radical change of the way they run their organization to get back to being what they once were. And then you'll need to find a legendary manager like Sir Alex Ferguson to fill that role again. It's just a large gap to overcome. And they had that opportunity right when Sir Alex Ferguson left. They were at the pinnacle, enough talent, enough money. If they would have adjusted their structure, leaned into the theories that have gotten Liverpool and Manchester City so far, and stopped relying simply on their brand to get things done, it really could have been interesting for Manchester United. And it's so interesting how Manchester United's fall in terms of relying on the old way of doing things, the old way of thinking, the old way of winning. We're just buying players, relying on your brand, using less analytics, using less structure. It's so interesting that their fall at the beginning of this decade and throughout the decade coincided with a lot of other big brands around the world having the same type of attitude falling. We saw the Los Angeles Lakers of the NBA have that type of fall in the beginning of the 2010s. The New York Yankees had an interesting fall right after Derek Jeter left at the beginning of the 2010s. There's two frontline organizations that fell off. The Dallas Cowboys have not been able to get out of their own way for much of the same reasons that Manchester United has struggled to find success. Why is that? It's called technology. It's called growing of money in these sports has emphasized to billionaire owners, to billionaires across the world that, hey, it's a valuable investment to own a sports team. The more money you put into it, we have all these technologies and all these systems and all these ways of doing business that are so efficient that if you utilize them, you're going to start to be able to take major leaps forward in terms of value of acquiring players. Saw an article this week, Liverpool has the most value per dollar per transfer. So they aren't just simply throwing money around as Manchester United often does. There's a purpose to everything they do. And we saw that in baseball. We saw Moneyball take a leap once technology really got rolling there at the beginning of the 2010s. And it just started rolling in favor of teams that were doing it the right way. We saw the Astros, the Cubs, and so many of these analytic-based teams that ran their front office properly start to have major success, while the Yankees at the beginning of the decade could not get out of their own way. And that's the same thing we've seen with Manchester United. And now they'll have a match at home in the Premier League against Wolverhampton. Right? They come off of a 3-2 aggregate defeat against Manchester City. Yes, they won 1-0, but that's in the Carabao Cup. I'm not sure how much you can put that on Manchester City. Sure, you win an FA Cup match on a muddy field 6-0. Nobody cares. The last time you were in the Premier League, you get bounced 2-0 by Burnley at home. And now the next time you come back to Old Trafford, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is still the manager. You have lost more matches than you've won since he became the permanent manager. And although the organization is saying the right things, doing what I would do, which is stick by your guy that you believe in, and then instead of firing him and blaming him, change your structure, change your way of doing business to be like Manchester City and Liverpool. Although I think they're so far behind that it would be a long-term change. But showing patience, understanding who you are now, understanding that you have fallen behind and you need to make it up and make it up slowly, and changing your manager every 3 seconds probably isn't going to help. But they can say all the right things and do all the right things. But if there are fans leaving the stadium with 15, 20 minutes to go in the match, as they did against Burnley, tomorrow against Wolverhampton, it's going to be a real problem in Manchester United. Because these fans at Old Trafford, they're unlike anything we can experience here in the United States. Truly. They will be vicious. They will be unforgiving and unrelenting towards Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So this is a high-pressure match this weekend for Manchester United. They've got a young team, a team that's really not ready, a team that was poorly constructed and put together. But if this team doesn't find a way to stay afloat and at least get a draw against Wolverhampton, I really think that they could pull the trigger and make a firing that they said they weren't going to make a week or two ago. It's just too much stuff. It's too much pressure. It's too many losses. And it's not even that I would agree with the decision. It's just your fans are going to go absolutely crazy, and you're not close enough structure-wise to give this guy a fighting opportunity. Now, who do you bring in? What interim guy do you bring in? It'll probably be worse than the guy you have now, but at least there's an excuse for the rest of the season. And then you can make a strong financial commitment to a structure, to a new manager, and you give him some time to get it right, like Liverpool did with Jurgen Klopp. Follow that model, Manchester United. Follow that model. I think you should move on from Solskjaer at the end of the year. But honestly, if I were the president of Manchester United and I look out at my beautiful stadium, one of the most historic stadiums, one of the most vibrant and beautiful fan bases in the world, and I look out of the stadium in a Premier League match against a team that's in the top 8 and fans have cleared out with 15 or 20 minutes to go in the match, hey, what am I supposed to do, right? It becomes almost an easy decision for Manchester United. Although I don't know if I'd make it, I could understand why you would make that decision. High pressure match for Manchester United against Wolverhampton. I actually think they'll figure this thing out. Wolverhampton was competitive against Liverpool last week, gave it their all, and I know Man United's in bad form, but to me, I think the pressure is going to be at such a level that Manchester United will be focused enough to just be the better side. Although I'm really nervous about that pick. I think probably 2-1. Maybe they start a little tight, Wolverhampton gets a goal, and then they just understand that they have to win this one, or they might not be able to walk around Manchester with their chin held high. It might be chaotic. It might be not glamorous, but I think they'd find a way to get it done because there is still talent, there is still quality on this Manchester United squad. But we'll see. Interesting stuff this weekend. Will Ole Gunnar Solskjaer make it through the weekend? That's really one of the most interesting questions facing the Premier League and facing Manchester United. And I think it's one of the more interesting stories of the 2010s, the fall of these large brands. And credit to some of those large brands, the Lakers and the Yankees, for finding their way back. But they're in leagues that are structured to help teams find their way back, to help small market teams find their way back, right? You get high draft picks. You're able to get more prospects. It's funneled to you. But the thing about European soccer, the thing about Premier League play, it's not structured for you to come back if your structure falls off. You just have to keep throwing money at the problem, and that might help in some years, and you might get lucky, but you'll consistently fall behind. So it's rough times for Manchester United. Interesting match coming tomorrow. We'll talk about Real Madrid. They've got a real opportunity to get a win against Atletico Madrid, a big-time match this weekend. Barcelona talk coming as well. That's next. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Yes, big welcome in, back in, GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Moore. Give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_soccer, Facebook GSMC Soccer. Like it. Give it a like. You can find this podcast. Real Madrid, they have an advantage in La Liga over Barcelona. We've talked about the reasons about this on this show. Barcelona fires their manager, then can't get out of its own way against Valencia. Kiki Setien's on rough patch, but you can't go and fire him after you fired the last guy because you're going to run out of bodies that can actually run this thing. Rumors that Barcelona players are running the practices. Players are making the lineup. Now, you can deny those rumors all they want, but they're bad rumors to have around your team. And that puts Real Madrid in a really interesting position this weekend. Atletico Madrid, who struggled this year, currently in 5th behind Sevilla and Getafe, will head in to the Bernabeu and face Real Madrid, who has won its last 5 matches, while Atletico only one win in the last 5, and that came over Barcelona earlier this month. They drew in the Primera Division, the La Liga. Atletico couldn't get a goal against, right now, the 19th team in the league on the table. So Atletico in not good straits right now. 3 losses before that, including a penalty loss in the Super Cup in Saudi Arabia against Real Madrid. And Real Madrid, to me, is a team in form. This is a team that is absolutely rolling. This is a team with Zinedine Zidane at the forefront. This match kicks off 10 a.m. Eastern on Saturday morning. This is a team that has tons of talent. They're organized. They believe in their manager. And they understand how big of an opportunity this is this weekend. A win against Atletico means you pick up wins against Sevilla, who's right now 3rd in the league. You pick up a win against Atletico, who's 5th in the league, and your rival in Madrid. So you would be at 49 points. Maybe Barcelona wins, but you still have a 3-point advantage against them. You have way more momentum than them. Your schedule will be softer moving forward than Barcelona's. And with the way Barcelona's going, they might not have this thing figured out yet. If you can find a way to get 3 points, if you're Real Madrid tomorrow, and Barcelona slips up, you're talking about a 6-point lead in La Liga. And Real Madrid, who I said on this show 4 weeks ago, should be the favorite moving forward, even though these teams were tied at 40 points halfway through the season. Real Madrid will be very much in the driver's seat in La Liga if those things happen this weekend. It's a massive weekend in Spain. So who do I think is going to win this matchup? I think it's Real Madrid. I think they understand the importance. They're against a team that hasn't been good as years past, a team that's not in form in Atletico Madrid, a team who Atletico might honestly be more focused on their Champions League draw. They're in the round of 16 in a couple weeks. Than they are this match against Real Madrid in a league race that they don't think they can compete in. They're 10 points behind Real Madrid. And that's a tough thing to make up with about 13, 14 matches left. So Atletico might not even be fully focused on this one. And if you drop one to Real Madrid, Atletico will be able to recover. Atletico will finish in the top 4. They're not really worried about that. And obviously it's your common rival, but I get Real Madrid at home too. So this feels like a Real Madrid win. This feels like a team that has a manager, has a culture, has a way of doing business. This is a type of game where teams that have all those things tend to take care of business. And I expect that from Real Madrid this weekend. And it will put Barcelona on skates if they find a way to lose. That would be rough. That would be awfully rough for Barcelona. It'd be rough for their fans. But Real Madrid has a real opportunity right now to make a run in La Liga. Let's take a look at the 538 La Liga standings in terms of how they think this is going to play out. We look at the standings so far. They think Real Madrid will win the league. They have them winning the league 64% of their simulations, with Barcelona winning 33%, and Sevilla and Atletico Madrid coming at 1%. And that's looking pretty good in terms of statistics, in terms of projections. And those projections will widen very far if this weekend Real Madrid were able to beat Atletico. 538 has Real Madrid as 58% favorites against Atletico Madrid. Barcelona, they're 86% favorites, and they should win. Will they win, though? We'll talk about that match on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Final segment of the show. The GSMC Soccer Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_soccer. Like us on Facebook, GSMC Soccer. Those things help out the program. Barcelona cleaned it up a little bit in the middle of the week. A 5-0 win in the Copa del Rey after the embarrassing performance about a week and a half ago, and then the loss against Valencia this past weekend. So maybe you feel a little bit better if you're Kiki Setien and Barcelona, but I still think it's on the fritz at Barcelona. And that's why I think it's going to be an interesting match this weekend against Levante, which right now 13th place in La Liga. This is a match that at any other time, in most other situations, in most years, I'd pick Barcelona every single time. I mean, this one's easy. They are more talented at every position. They have a much better culture. They are at home against a team that's in bad form and at the bottom half of the table. 3 straight losses right now for Levante. A 2-0 loss, 3-1 loss, 1-0 loss. And none of the opponents are impressive in those 3 matches. And right now, it's still hard for me to come out and say that Barcelona is certainly going to win this match because of how chaotic they've looked. If 5-0 win against a team that's at the bottom of the La Liga table in the Copa del Rey, where you wake up, you realize you can't have that same type of performance like you did against Ibiza, and you wake up a bit and you're better. But I'm still nervous about a team in 13th. You're at home, you'll feel a little bit of pressure. And the key to this match is going to be the first 20 minutes. If Barcelona looks rough, looks like they're not playing together again, looks like they really don't have a plan or aren't listening to the manager's plan, which that's what it looked like against Valencia. It looked like one team was a managed team with a formation, a plan of attack, and another team that was just 11 talented dudes that got together on 11 o'clock at a Sunday and started playing together at 11:30. That's what Barcelona looked like against Valencia. So the first 20 minutes is crucial because, listen, we all say that playing at home is an advantage, and it certainly should be. But there are certain situations where playing at home can become a disadvantage when there's a lot of pressure. Like, for example, a team that has consistently failed at home that has an aggressive fan base. Cincinnati. It's more difficult to play at home in the playoffs in Cincinnati. Why? Because that city hasn't won a playoff game at home since 1995. So as soon as things go wrong, they're going to get nervous. And there's going to be pressure. And the entire team will feel that nerve, feel that pressure. And that's exactly what could happen to Barcelona. You come out against the 13th place team of the league, and this match is at 2 p.m. So we'll know the result of Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid. And if Real Madrid has won earlier that day, in the first 25 minutes of this match, it appears Barcelona is again not organized. They aren't able to attack a team that's clearly going to park the bus, that's clearly going to sit back. That home field advantage turns to a home field disadvantage about 20, 25 minutes in because the whole crowd's going to be looking around like, what are we doing? Why did we fire that manager? We've looked awful. We're really going to fall 6 points behind of Real Madrid? Or even if we get a win, we'll be 5 points behind if we find a way to draw this one? And all of a sudden it turns into a home field disadvantage. And it becomes really difficult moving forward as a player, especially in a sport where you are awfully close to the fans and it's a sport of finesse. There's a lot of touch to it, right? In the sport of football, you can kind of just start running through people. But when you're a soccer player, you need that first touch to be crisp. And it's an awfully hard thing to do. It's a lot less muscle memory in terms of you have to be moving a lot of times. There's a lot of things going on. You need your focus, and you can't feel that type of pressure because your touches will be heavier. You won't be as crisp. You won't be as clean. And that's why the first 25 minutes, I think, will determine whether Barcelona finds a way to lose this game. If they don't score in the first 25, I think it's a draw or a Barcelona loss. If they score in the first 25, Barcelona could win this one 3-4-0. Because then the pressure's taken off. And Levante will start a press, trying to draw it, and then it just gets rough because Barcelona has talent, more talent, all across the board. But this is the problem with firing managers. This is the problem with putting pressure on your own organization by making a change like that. Because when you make a decision, when you say it's not working, even though you're tied at the top of the league table and in the round of 16 of the Champions League, when every outside perception look at it and say, well, it's maybe not working the way Barcelona should work, but it's working. And you bring in a guy and you say, this guy's going to manage us the way we were managed at the beginning of the decade when we were by far and away the best soccer club in the world. We were what Liverpool is now. Winning Champions Leagues, winning our league, and defining a style of play for a couple years where everybody's going to follow that style of play. The tiki-taka, right? And you go from that, you say you're going to bring that in, you're going to bring that back, replace what was kind of working, not all the way working, but kind of working. You just put a lot of pressure on the new guy. Because if he makes it worse, well, what were you doing? Maybe you just weren't good enough. Maybe you weren't ready to dominate like Liverpool is. Maybe you should have believed in the last guy. And that's why you don't want to put pressure on yourself by making changes like that are rash. And it's so interesting in soccer because these teams will just keep throwing around money and they will be competitive at the top and they will find a way to win another Champions League and more La Liga titles. But I really think the way to get to dominance in world soccer is to have a consistent plan, be able to spend money, spend it smart, efficiently, and tie that all together into a cohesive game plan and a team that believes in itself, believes in what it's doing, believes in what its manager's doing, is proud to play for that club. You combine all those things, that's how you get a winning product. That's how you get a product like Liverpool, where you're winning Champions Leagues, you're winning your League Cup, you're winning titles. And you can go back. Every team just has a consistent manager. It's tough to find years where it was inconsistent and a little rough and rocky. And we can have the chicken or the egg argument in terms of, well, they were bad, we're never going to win, so they made a change, and then they didn't win it. But I think if you stick through rough patches, you build cultures, that's how to win in all sports and in all businesses. And I have a belief in that, and I hope Barcelona finds its way again, finds its way back into having a good culture, a good system, and a good team. That'd make La Liga a lot more interesting. But it could be decided this weekend if Real Madrid finds a way to bring it home. That's going to do it for a show. It was a fun one. A lot of fun. Previewed a lot of matches. Dove in a lot of good topics. And we'll see what happens this weekend, and we'll recap it all on Monday. I'm really excited that you were able to listen to this show. Please rate, review, and subscribe this podcast as it is presented by the GSMC Podcast Network. That helps us, helps the entire network. Please check out all the other great shows from the talented hosts across the GSMC Podcast Network. There's so much great stuff. Stuff you might not even think you want to listen to. You want to go check out that page. You'll find yourself a podcast that piques your interest. I hope we piqued your interest today. I'm Lukas Moore. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on Monday. This has been the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.